is CNN Breaking News.
Well, the attack on Syria has many political agendas in play. So to discuss that, joining me now are political analysts Michael Genovese and Peter Mathews in Los Angeles. Thanks for being with us again, both of you. I'd just like to explore why you think that President Trump chose the day he did to conduct these strikes. Many people thought that they might not come this weekend because the investigators from the OPCW haven't finished their investigation yet. So perhaps, Michael, if we could start with you on that. Why do you think this timing was the one the president chose?
Well, you don't want to signal too clearly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. You also have to remember that you have 3 different countries involved, and they all have their different pressures, time pressures and political pressures. And so President Trump especially has a very, very short time fuse because there's so much bad news that's come out today, whether it's about his attorney and about paying to silence women that he and his friends have been with. So there's a tremendous amount of bad news in America, and I'm not saying this is a wag the dog situation, but the president really needed something to push those bad stories off the news, and this happened to come at the right time.
Peter, you mentioned in the last hour that, well, many people have said the president's foreign policy has been lacking strategy, it's been fairly incoherent, but has his ability to at least have these conversations with key allies like Macron and Theresa May and get them together to devise a joint strategy in executing these airstrikes, has that, do you think, won him any favors in the political, like the domestic base in the UK, in the US rather?
Well, certainly more than him going it alone. That would have been pretty devastating in the some quarters here. But the fact that he brought 2 major allies along with him probably ameliorated this judgment people had about him. But I think that it wasn't enough, because in the end, he did precipitously attack or launch some missile attacks, because he could have waited till after the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons had finished their inspections. Just a few hours later, they were coming in to do it. And I think that perhaps he did it because he didn't want them to get in the way, in a sense. And I think it's very dangerous, because it could have, maybe it worked this time in a sense, but it may not work another time if he does the same thing again with Syria or some other country. I think it's much better to go ahead and start the negotiations between, promote negotiations between Assad and the opposition. And I know the opposition is pretty much driven out right now. The other thing is, don't forget that the president had said, President Trump, that he was going to withdraw the troops, American troops from Syria, just a little while before, and he changed his mind and decided to keep them there. When he said that, though, then they said that what happened was that Mr. Assad actually launched the chemical attacks. Now, why would he have launched chemical attacks right after President Trump said he was going to withdraw troops? Those things were, I think, warnings which we should have waited till after the inspections occurred in order to verify there was a real reason to hit Syria.
So, Michael, Peter thinks that perhaps the president may have acted slightly rashly in that respect and may have had a stronger case for a form of military strike had he waited and had that evidence. Would you agree?
Well, I think the president is strategically pulled in 2 different directions, and this reflects his confusion. On the one hand, he believes in the America First policy, and on the other hand, he has inherited America's global leadership responsibilities. The America First policy, as Peter pointed out, was reflected in his statement, we're going to pull troops out of Syria very soon. A few days later, it was the global leadership perspective that came into play, and that's what you saw today. So, I think these are goals and visions that are in conflict, and the president hasn't sorted that out yet, and therefore he's not quite sure what direction to go in.
Peter, Michael highlights there something quite interesting, these sort of inconsistencies in the president's position, and a few people pointed out that the president's remarks about this military strike in Syria today exposed a lot of those inconsistencies in his attitude towards foreign policy. For example, he's talking about America first, but then he's also indicating that America might be able to play quite a big role in assisting with the issues in the Middle East, and he said there was it was a very troubled region and America would be a friend and they would help. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that because of that forces pulling him apart, he's lurching from one position to the other rather than being more consistent and saying, let's go and we'll take a middle path. We don't have to pull American troops out of Syria right away. Let's go ahead and do this step by step, negotiating with the regime and with Russia. But we don't have to attack Syria with missiles either until the OPCW actually had a chance to inspect those and to see what the chemical attacks were all about. So I said he should be more measured and more consistent in his approach, as opposed to lurching from one pull to the other pull. And that's what's been going on, unfortunately. And sometimes in the crisis, this can be very critically dangerous.
Michael, Peter, thanks so much for joining us at this very early hour to share your thoughts.